Welcome back to Ontario Cryptids. I'm happy to see you all return for yet another episode. I'm also happy to see that the weather is getting warmer outside, so hopefully spring is right around the corner. Today I have 4 encounter stories lined up, so stay tuned. If you're enjoying this type of content, be sure to hit the like button, the subscribe button, and hit that notification bell. You won't want to miss out on next week's episode. And if you have an encounter of your own, I'd love to hear it. Send your stories to ontariocryptids@gmail.com, and it could be featured in a future episode. Let's get started with today's encounter stories. Around 40 years ago, me and a friend of mine were horseback riding alongside the FAC railroad tracks between SR 207 and King Estate Road. We were heading south towards King Estate Road when we noticed a smell like something was dead. I thought maybe it was a hog or something that died in the woods. We heard branches breaking like something was in the woods, but didn't pay much attention to it. Then the horses started to act up. The horses were blowing and snorting and rearing, and I just thought that they were being bad and difficult. As we passed that area, the horses acted better, and we went on down this side of the track, still heading south. When I heard the sounds of rocks in the side of the tracks, like someone was walking up onto them, I told a friend that I was with, "Don't walk the horse on the rocks," and she said, "I'm not." Just then, I turned to look around. She was just behind me to see what it was. That's when we saw it. It was about 150 yards away from us where we just passed, but standing in the middle of the railroad tracks. It was sort of in a crouched position, but not all the way down, like it just saw us and froze and stared at us. What I saw was slim and covered in reddish-brown hair. It had long arms, and I could see the eyes a little. It was at least 6.5 feet tall and around 250 pounds or better, with no neck. It was getting dark out, so we couldn't see any of the details of the face. All the time that we saw it, we had to fight with the horses to keep them under control. They didn't want any part of whatever it was, and neither did we. So we got out of there and never went back riding in that area again. It wasn't a bear. And it wasn't a man unless he was covered in hair from head to toe. I live in the Pocahontas County near the Monongahela National Forest. It covers pretty much all of the county. I was on a mountain named Spruce Flat, and I can look out my front window and see it. I have heard a howl much like the one from Ohio. While walking down the road one night, me and a friend heard a strange vocalization, then the sound of heavy footsteps coming down the field to our right. They sounded pretty intent, so I got my gun out. Then I heard a crunch and a thud as the footsteps went over the side of the hill to our left, circled around until it was right beside us at the bottom of the hill. It never showed itself. It stayed out of the light, but it did make another vocalization, the same one it made before coming down the field. It was sort of a high-pitched hoot, but it dragged out kind of long. It wasn't an owl. I'm familiar with the local animals and the sounds they make. This was something new to me. I walked down the road further and I could see where this thing just pushed the old fence down. It had to be pretty powerful to do that, even though it was an old fence. My father was up in the mountains once and said that he could smell a horrible stench in the woods. He said it smelled like a dirty, sweaty man who hadn't taken a bath in a few years. The smell just came over the whole area. I was up the hill a ways from him, but I didn't smell anything. I still think something's up there on that mountain. It has some pretty dense wood, and right down the road is Cranberry Glades. There are plants which exists only there. It is pretty much like a modern prehistoric habitat. I heard the same vocalization there as I talked about earlier. The only other thing that I've heard about that area happened in the early 1900s at a logging camp. Some men saw a large, light gray-haired man-like creature running along the tops of the log piles. This one is kind of scary. Something dragged a mule under a cattle crate and tore it to shreds. When the farmers found it, he heard very heavy breathing and loud footsteps in the frozen snow. He said it sounded like a huge man. And once a hunter saw something in a tree up there. It took years for him to say what it was, and all he said was, he saw the devil. Two friends and myself were hiking in my friend's new 950-acre property, which included many miles of wooded area. It was getting dark and we had been hiking all day, so we decided to head back to her house. We got turned around somewhere at a fork in the trail, so we decided to backtrack to see where we got lost. Instead of finding our way out, we ended up getting even further into the woods, and darkness was quickly falling. We took out our flashlights and proceeded to find her house. We turned a corner that was covered in rocks when we smelt this horrible smell. Since we lived in this area, we didn't think anything of it until we heard something following us that was breathing heavily. At this point, we were terrified, so we picked up our pace, and we could tell it was too. So we turned around to finally see what it was, and all we saw was this huge man-like creature dashing off the trail, but we were able to get a good look at it. It had an ape-like face and was covered in dark brown black hair, and it smelled horrible. Maybe 7 to 8 feet tall, hairy, bulky figure. We watched it for a few minutes as it disappeared into the woods. We didn't know who to tell until we found this website, and we realized other people had seen what they thought was Bigfoot in Virginia. The area is heavily wooded mountainous area on an unmarked trail. It's rocky and has caves near the James River. It was late October of 2008, unsure of the exact date. At approximately 2:30 a.m., my oldest son called me on his cell phone. I was upstairs doing some research on the computer, and he was downstairs on the back porch smoking a cigarette. I could tell by the tone of his voice that he was scared or excited about something. He said, "You need to get out here right now and bring the spotlight and the shotgun with you." I immediately retrieved both items from the bedroom and met him on the back porch. His eyes were as big as dinner plates, and he looked a little pale. Now, my son, 18 at the time of this sighting, started hunting the swamps of North Florida with me when he was 4, and he is normally very calm and doesn't get spooked or excited very easily. So when I saw him like this, I knew something had definitely gotten his attention. So I said, "What's up?" He said, "Point the light over there between the 2 sheds at the oak tree." I aimed the spotlight to where I thought he had indicated, but saw nothing. Then he said, "No, beside the oak tree." Again, I aimed the light, but still didn't see anything. At this, he became agitated and grabbed my arm, moving the spotlight where he wanted it and exclaiming, "Right effing there." The light revealed a large upright figure standing behind the oak tree. The animal was standing obliquely to us, using the tree to block our view. The tree was probably 3.5 to 4 feet in diameter and about 30 yards from us, but we could still see it standing there, with the right side of its body at an angle to us. I noticed how the arms hung almost to its knees, and it stood slouched forward a bit, with his knees bent slightly. It was covered with brownish red hair, maybe 2 to 3 inches long, and appeared to be uniform in length except for the face, which appeared to be ape-like. It sounds funny, but the face looked similar to Harry from Harry and the Hendersons. As the animal stood there, I panned the spotlight off to the right from its location. When I did this, it half-stepped from behind the tree, peering to see what we were doing. When I brought the beam of light back, it immediately stepped back behind the oak tree, remaining at an oblique angle to our position. Again, panned the light away to the right, and the animal again half-stepped to the right to see what we were doing. When the light came back, it again hid behind a tree, almost in amusement. I turned the spotlight off for 3 to 4 seconds, and then pointed it directly at the tree and hit the switch on. The beam of the light revealed the animal standing to the right of the oak tree, squarely facing us. When the light came on, the animal squinted and retreated back behind the oak tree. Only this time, it retreated back through the woods, using the tree to block our view of its departure. After we could no longer hear it crashing away through the brush, my son and I stood there shaking in amazement of what we had seen. After a moment, I finally managed to smile and said, "Holy crap, dude, we just saw a Sasquatch." With that, my son replied, "That was frickin' awesome." We went back inside and talked about the details of what we had seen for quite a while before heading off to bed. The next morning, I went out to look for tracks where we'd seen the late-night visitor. Here in Tennessee, the soil is mostly clay and not conducive to tracking, but I was still able to locate 2 footprints behind the oak tree. They measured just under 17 inches in length and about 6.5 inches wide across the ball of the foot. Also, there was another print in the leaf litter to the right of the tree, but it wasn't clear enough to measure. Due to the hardness of the soil, the tracks were not deep enough to cast. Further investigation did not yield any further tracks or spores along the animal's route of egress. I have discussed this event with friends and co-workers, mostly being met with doubt and skepticism, but my son and I both have no doubt whatsoever about what we had seen. Before we moved out of that house due to divorce, we continued to observe strange occurrences from time to time, but never had another visual encounter. Well, that's going to wrap things up for today. Thank you all for listening until the end. I hope you found these 4 encounter stories just as fascinating as I did. If you enjoy this content and want to support the channel, consider becoming a member and enjoy some exclusive perks. Now, let's acknowledge the current OC members. I would like to thank Elizabeth, Jim, Diana, and Teresa for their contribution and support as member of the OC membership program. Thank you for your support. And of course, don't forget to hit that like button, the subscribe button, and hit that notification bell so you'll never miss another episode. If you have an encounter story that you would like to share, send it to OntarioCryptids@gmail.com. I would be honored to share your story with the OC community. Wishing you all a great week ahead, and be sure to tune in next time for another exciting episode on Ontario Cryptids. Oh, and before I forget, for all the ladies out there, Happy International Women's Day.